welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 335, and today's date is April 8th, 2014, and the title of this episode is, As the IMF Pushes Recovery, War Propaganda with Russia Intensifies. So let's take the first part here. The IMF came out today, and they're letting everyone know that the European nations, the United States, are in this fantastic recovery, strong recovery. GDP is up, strong manufacturing. Those southern European nations, they are really bouncing back at this point. Unemployment, they're expecting to go really, really low as the year goes along. And those other nations like China, Russia, North Korea, all those other nations are really having a lot of problems. They're not seeing strong manufacturing, GDP not that great, and we could see what is happening right here. They're keeping this illusion alive to continually convince everyone in the world, in the European nations and in America, that we are in this recovery, because they are waiting for this event to take all eyes off of the central banks and the governments and put it on another nation. And this is really what they're trying to do at this point, because we can see from everything that they're saying is completely false. It's an illusion, because we have been tracking everything all along: real estate, retail, unemployment, and let me just say, the European nations, they're saying that the southern European nations are bouncing back, unemployment will start going down, and they really see great things there. And so far what we've seen is unemployment has been going up, there's more austerity, and there's more debt. And I don't see where they're getting this. And of course, they are just getting all of this and packaging it for everyone to convince us that there's a recovery. I hate to say this, but if we go back to 2008, the same people told us that across the world they're not predicting or forecasting any type of recession whatsoever. They just see strong growth in 2008. Well, look what happened in 2008. We had a crash. We had a recession. People lost their wealth, so we know they have no idea what they're talking about, or actually they do know what they're talking about. They just don't want us to realize that this is fake, an illusion to cover up what is actually coming. Now, if we take the other side with the war propaganda, we see that the United States, NATO, European nations are all out there, and of course Ukraine. They are all out there telling us that Russia is building up troops ready to go into Ukraine. This could happen at any day, and right now we understand that this is completely fake and false and phony, because as we reported all along, there was an NBC crew that drove up and down the border on the Russian side, about 1,200 miles, saw absolutely no buildup whatsoever. They allowed U.S., France, Germany to fly over Russia in the open air treaty to check out to see if they were building up any type of military assets. There was nothing. They allowed Ukraine, acting government, which is not elected whatsoever, to go into Russia to see if they were building up any type of troop movement. There was nothing. So all of this is fake, phony, and it's all being put out there to convince us that Russia is about to do something. And all Russia is doing at this point is having different regions of Ukraine come to Russia looking for independence, do not want to be part of this coup d'etat, and again, the central bankers, U.S. government, EU, the plan didn't go the way they wanted it. It completely backfired, and they don't know what to do at this point. And I'm starting to think at this time that this propaganda that they're using up in Ukraine to say that, Russia's ready to go to war is a diversion to what is really going on in Syria, because we're seeing a huge, huge buildup of military assets, bases in Syria with where they're training people and then pushing them into Syria. And I'm starting to think that this is a diversion now, and the real action and the real false flag is definitely going to happen in Syria. But we'll get into that a little bit later in this report. Let's move into the economic collapse news. And we understand there's a lot of nations that are looking to completely separate themselves from their country. We're looking at Catalonia right now. The Spanish parliament is to vote on whether to allow the autonomous community of Catalonia to hold a referendum on independence from Spain. Catalonian residents widely support the proposed referendum, with a declaration of self-determination unanimously adopted by Catalonia's parliament in January 2013. And meanwhile, we know that they're not going to allow this to happen. They're going to try to stop it. And right now, the Prime Minister is out there saying that the main opposition, socialists, are both determined to prevent the breakup of Spain. So we could see that they're going to push this, and it's probably most likely not going to go anywhere at this point in time, just like in Italy. But we'll have to see what happens. I can be completely wrong, but I just don't see it happening at this time. Now, in Cyprus, we understand that there were bail-ins, there were bailouts, unemployment is continually ticking up, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, I don't understand why the income tax revenue has dropped by 8%. Well, that's because there's nobody working. Unemployment is continually going up. You're not bringing in revenue. So you can have all the bail-ins and bailouts you want, but if people aren't working and people can't open new businesses, you are not going to receive that tax revenue. And right now they're looking at it, and if we really look into this, we see the private sector income tax marked a decrease of 9%, while the self-employed income tax also recorded a decrease of 29%. And we also have to remember there were capital controls in effect. People couldn't get their money out. People couldn't live and survive. People lost their jobs because of this. People lost their businesses because of this, and they're trying to figure out why the revenue is dropping. Listen, whenever the IMF comes in, doles out debt, loots the country of their assets, does bail-ins, it does not help the people whatsoever. We've seen it over and over and over again. We saw it with Greece. They gave a bailout. They said, oh, everything's fine. Greece is back on track. Well, 8, 9, 10 months later, right back to where they started, because there was no revenue coming in, because they laid off even more people. Another bailout went in, and then the same exact thing happened, and unemployment started to skyrocket. And in all of these countries, we're seeing the youth unemployment continually skyrocketing. It has not stopped, and this is the foundation of the next generation to bring this country to the next level, all these countries I should say, and it is just not happening. Again, we have to remember the youth, they come out of school or college, or they come out of high school, they go find work, they graduate college, they go find work, they save up some money, they spend some money in retail stores, they save enough, they either get married or whatever, they buy a home, they buy a car. We are not seeing this happen, and this is why the economies are having a very rough time. There is no youth rebound at this time that we normally see. Now, up in Canada, they're having the same exact problem. We're seeing that all these countries that had this housing boom, it's a bubble. And right now, Canadian housing starts fell more than expected in March, and building permits dropped sharply in February. Of course, they're blaming it on the weather. It's always the weather. The bigger picture is an ongoing cooling of residential construction activity in Canada. Housing starts fell by 17.7%. The decline was steeper than 2.7% drop forecast by analysts. So we can see what's happening here. It's happening in the UK, it's happening in the United States, in Australia, in Canada. This is a bubble on a massive scale. We saw this back in 2008, where all the countries had a problem with their housing. I shouldn't say all, most of the countries had a housing problem, and it completely imploded on itself. The same thing's going to happen in Canada. It's happening in the U.S., and we are seeing this. And every single day that this is reported, and we continually go on to show that housing is continually declining, where people aren't taking out mortgages. It doesn't matter what the corporate media is saying, because if they're telling you that prices are going up, the housing market's rebounding, how can they explain a contracting mortgage departments where they're laying off people? How can they say, oh, this is increasing and getting better when mortgage originations are contracting? How can they say this is getting better when they can't get the American people to purchase these homes, and they're trying everything: subprime, adjustable rate mortgages, 100% financing, no money down. They're trying everything they possibly can. They just can't get it to work, and now everything's starting to decline, and it's starting to affect other countries, and all of this is coming about just like in 2008. Now, we understand that unemployment is completely false. It's made up. The Census Bureau is also being investigated right now for giving out falsified employment numbers, and we understand that all this is fake and it's not real. And right now, small business hiring plans have collapsed at the fastest rate since Lehman in the ensuing 2 months. And CAPEX spending plans dropped and hiring expectations dropped to lows seen 11 months ago. So we are definitely seeing something happen here, and that something is the collapse. This is the beginning stages. We are seeing it, but they're not going to let it go too much further because they will need to bring this event full circle to cover this up. And this is what they've been planning on. And we can see they're having all the preps going right now. They're demonizing Russia. They're demonizing China, North Korea. They did the pivot to Asia, surrounding Russia now with NATO and U.S. troops. And this whole thing is being brought about, and they've been shipping military assets to Syria, training soldiers, getting ready for this next false flag event. And when I say the next one, I don't mean these little ones where they're saying, oh, it's Assad doing a chemical attack, oh, it's Turkey who snuck in. I'm talking about the main one that is coming, because they are trying everything right now before they hit us with the big false flag event. Now, the IMF is out there, and this is what they're saying, that recovery is strengthening. There's a 3.6% increase in global outlook in 2014, and they're seeing 3.9% in 2015, and they're continually saying that this is going to get better and better and better. And they're saying advanced economies are going to see a substantial improvement. Recovery that was starting to take hold is becoming stronger and broader. Investors are feeling less worried about sustainability. Then why are the people in the stock market, the insiders, cashing out at this time? Why do they have bets that the market is coming down? Recovery is strongest in the USA. Of course, we have all the illusion. We have the recalculated, manipulated GDP numbers where they went all the way back to 1929, included research and development, and recalculated all the way up to present time. They took inflation and they recalculated that. They removed energy, food. They included house cleaning and other things to show inflation is growing a little bit, which we know is growing a lot more than they're saying. Unemployment, we understand that the Census Bureau is being investigated for falsified information. We understand that these numbers have been manipulated since 1994. They don't count those people who haven't been on an interview within the last 4 weeks or so. If you're looking for a job on the internet and you're sending out your resume, you're not counted. If you're on unemployment, you're not counted. So if you have a part-time job and you came from a $100,000 full-time job, now you have a part-time job of $20,000, you're considered employed. So we can see how they completely manipulate all these numbers, and this is why they're saying that the recovery is strongest in the USA. Oh, and let's not forget about retail and real estate. Retail stores closing all over the place, layoffs happening every single place you look. GameStop, hundreds of stores. Staples, hundreds of stores. Target, closing stores. Abercrombie & Fitch, closing stores. Aeropostale, closing stores. And there are many, I'm doing this off the top of my head, there are many others that are, JCPenney, Macy's, all closing stores, laying off people. So we're seeing all of this happen. Now, real estate, we're seeing the same exact thing. Mortgage applications down by 60 to 66%. Major layoffs in the mortgage departments. Mortgage companies actually closing. New home building, dead. Prices starting to fall. Insiders who've been purchasing these homes with cash are trying to cash out at this time. And the Fed is still pumping in billions upon billions of dollars into the banks every single month to buy that toxic real estate. So nothing has really changed here. This is not a recovery. It is not strong. It is a complete illusion. Now, they're also saying UK and Germany imbalances still exist. Acute risks have decreased, but they have not disappeared. Adjustment and recovery in Southern Europe can be taken for granted, especially in the context of the deflation fears. So we can see they're trying to push their agenda forward to let everyone know that everything is fine, and we know it is not. We know this is fake. Now, what's interesting with Obamacare, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, and how I feel about Obamacare, just go back to my other reports and you will hear pretty much how I feel about Obamacare. I'm not going to repeat it here. But what's interesting about Obamacare, and they're saying it's a success, they have had all these people join up, but when Obama took office, and we really look at this information here, we see there was about 15.4% of the people were uninsured. And this is when Obama came into office. Right now, since Obamacare, there are 15.6 people who are uninsured. So we're actually pretty much a little bit worse at the same spot from when he started until now with Obamacare. Because what really happened was all those people who were completely canceled from their insurance had to sign up to Obamacare. So all they did was rotate those people that were already insured. They got dumped. They went ahead and they signed up for Obamacare because they didn't have insurance. They're not seeing the people that were uninsured actually sign up, and the youth of America did not sign up. So we are back to where we started. Obamacare not going anywhere whatsoever. And actually, right before Obamacare, the amount of uninsured was a lot better right before. So we could see what is happening right now. Obamacare really didn't do anything. It just rotated of those people that already had insurance to go on to Obamacare. So he didn't give insurance to all those people who were uninsured, because we would have seen this number really get a lot better, and he would have been saying, and they would have been out there saying, look, there's hardly anyone uninsured now. But we are not seeing that whatsoever. And again, we have to remember, those people who went onto Obamacare, 53% right now, haven't even paid their first month premium. So until we get that number, we can't really say 7.1 million have insurance. We could say 3.5 million, but let's see how many people keep up with their payments. And let's see how many people say, this is really a good thing to have, that I'm paying for insurance, I have high deductibles, and I'm not getting any benefit whatsoever when I go to the doctor because I'd never reach my deductible. So as time goes on, we'll see how this plays out. Okay, now in Poland, we understand that Poland is bordering right against Russia, and Poland is having their own difficult time there in the economy. And right now, Poland on Wednesday confiscated all bond holdings of private pension funds. This will be booked on their balance sheet to reduce their debt to GDP ratio by as much as 8%. So they went ahead and they confiscated the bond holdings of the private pension funds. So they just raided the pension fund. And we are definitely going to see this all over the place. We're going to see bail-ins. We're going to see the pension funds raided. We are going to see all this happen because these economies are not doing well. They are teetering on depression at this time. There's not enough people working, there's too much debt, and they're looking inward to get the money. They're looking into the banks, they're looking into Social Security reserves, they're looking into pensions, and this is what they're doing right now. And we can see that each country is doing it their own way. They're imposing more taxes, and eventually this will come full circle where everyone will have a bail-in, because this is why they created the bail-in document, because when all else fails, they do the bail-in. And we saw this happen in Cyprus, And we're going to see this happen across Europe, Australia, Canada, Switzerland, and the United States. Now, in Afghanistan, we understand there was an election, and the United States placed a puppet government in Afghanistan, and they thought they would, do whatever they wanted them to do. And the president there was saying, we don't want United States back. We don't like the bilateral security deal. And right now they had elections, and they're seeing that there were 3,000 violations reported during the Afghan elections, and people are saying that these elections were rigged, they were falsified, and there was a lot of fraud, and they want a redo of these elections. And you have to remember, the United States government, the central bankers, in all these countries where they put the puppet regimes into place, continually to falsify elections. They always seem to do this to make sure that their puppet government stays in place, or they just don't have elections at all. They continually push it off, because they do not want to lose the power there. Because if they lose the power, their biggest fear is losing the central bank in the country and losing the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency in that country, and they don't want this to happen. And this is why we're seeing this all over the place. We saw it in Turkey, where they found ballots in trash bags in all different schools, because they wanted Erdogan to stay into power. They didn't want someone else coming in there that didn't agree with the United States and the central bankers. They need a puppet government to maintain control in all of these countries. Now we're seeing major problems out in Ukraine. And what is very interesting out there is that now that the U.S. government has taken control of Ukraine, and they put in a puppet government which was not elected whatsoever, they already had them picked out before the coup d'etat. They're in power. But the people who are rising up right now, and the people who are saying, you know what, we don't want to be part of Ukraine, we want our independence, they are starting to call them terrorists. Now, if you notice, they're following the same playbook as they always do. In the countries like Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, and in Africa, once they have the puppet government in place, those people who want freedom from the government, who want something different from the puppet government, those people who want to vote and be separate and apart from this puppet government, are now called terrorists. And if you remember, just a month and a half ago, we had the people in Ukraine speaking up that they want to be on the EU system. They want to be part of the EU. And they said, let the people speak. Let the people know how you feel. And they applauded them when they overthrew the government in Ukraine, and they took over. Now what's happening is the pro-Russian people are speaking up, saying, you know what, we don't want to be part of Ukraine. We see what's happening. You're in debt. There are no jobs. Energy prices are going up. It kind of looks like Greece to me. And we're getting sick and tired of this, and we want to be separate and apart. And of course, they go right into these people are terrorists. And right now, at least 70 activists have been arrested after so-called anti-terrorist operations launched by Ukraine's Interior Ministry in the eastern city of Kharkov. On Monday, Kharkov protesters erected barricades around administrative buildings and the regional headquarters of the Ukraine Security Service. The demonstrators soon took control of the building. In Donetsk, activists proclaimed the creation of a People's Republic of Donetsk after seizing the local administration building. And on Tuesday, protesters gathered in Lugansk, also outside the regional department of the SBU. And Ukraine reported that the protesters were setting up barricades and pouring flammable mixtures on them. And we can see what is happening, and there could be a civil war in Ukraine if this continually escalates. And right now, Russia's saying, let's calm down here. Let's take it easy. And the United States, of course, is saying that Russia is the cause of all this, that they're spurring up and pushing all these people to do this, that they're trying to destabilize the government. You mean almost like the United States, the central bankers did in Ukraine, when they had the coup d'etat. Now they're blaming it on Russia that they're doing the same exact thing. How interesting. Now, Russia is also out there saying that they're alleging that American experts from private military organizations like Greystone are disguised as soldiers, as well as militants from the Ukrainian far-right group right sector had joined Ukrainian forces preparing for the crackdown in the country's east, and they said they were going and they were looking to bring in foreign military into Ukraine to help them maintain control in Ukraine, and it looks like there could be troops in there already doing this. And there are people out there, the Ukrainian people are out there saying that armed groups were attacking people who wanted to defend their rights by peaceful means. You are today doing everything to intimidate people. You arrest people, start fighting people who have a different point of view, he said. And again, where is the United States saying, oh, let the people speak. They have a right to speak. They have a right for democracy. They have a right for freedom. But instead, as we've always seen in every single country, when you don't agree with the puppet government, they come down hard on you. They push you back with drones. They push you back with water cannons. They push you back with beatings. And we're seeing this all throughout every single country that the United States, the central bankers, have invaded, put up a puppet government. Now they have to keep the people who want their country back pushed back, or they kill them. Either one. And this is what we are seeing, and they're continually doing right now. Now, like I said, the International Monetary Fund has sharply downgraded Russia's growth forecast, and based on what has happened, growth in Russia is lower than it would have otherwise been. There are probably two main channels affecting Russia from an economic point of view. First is the investment climate and the hesitation by investors on putting or leaving money in Russia. Another reason for the downgrade is that the IMF expects Russia will have to hike interest rates, which could spur further inflation. The Washington, D.C. based fund predicts inflation will slow to 5.8%, but that price growth will continue to accelerate. As the ruble weakens, the ruble has so far weakened 7.5% against the dollar in 2014. Now, of course, we're not seeing any of this in the United States. We're not seeing, inflation. We're not seeing the dollar weakening. We're not seeing the government printing money. We're not seeing them recalculate the GDP, inflation, unemployment. We're not seeing any of that. So America is in a continuous recovery. America has no manufacturing. It was all sent overseas, and they're seeing a huge, huge recovery here in the States. But in Russia, they're seeing their economy actually getting worse because of Ukraine and because of the sanctions they placed on individuals and what a bank. But we have American companies still doing business in Russia. There are European companies still doing business in Russia. Russia is still supplying natural gas to all the European nations at this time. They are starting their own payment system. They have made deals to use the ruble to sell their oil and commodities with China, with Iran, with Syria, with India, with North Korea, and other nations. And they are buying gold like it's going out of style. China is doing the same. The United States has not purchased any gold, so far as I can tell. And most people say that the United States actually has no gold. So the IMF is pretty much correct in their assumption and their analysis of which country is doing well and which country is not going to do well. Now, of course, John Kerry is out there, and the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has threatened Russia with more sanctions if the country continues an illegal and illegitimate effort to destabilize Ukraine. Of course, they're not going to put sanctions on Russia. That would be absolutely ridiculous. They know this. The American economy is very fragile. Russia economy is very strong. They have a lot of manufacturing. and they realize they're not really going to do anything. And this went on to say that, quite simply, what we see from Russia is an illegal and illegitimate effort to destabilize a sovereign state and create a contrived crisis with paid operatives across an international boundary. Well, John Kerry, isn't that what the United States did? They shipped in agent provocateurs into Ukraine. They paid about $5 billion to have this done. Then they pushed the government out and replaced it with a government that was not elected. They did this in Ukraine. They did this in Thailand. They did this in Iraq. They did it in Lebanon. They did it in Libya. They're doing it in Africa. They're doing it in Yemen. So really, he's talking about the United States then. And of course, John Kerry went on to say that their economy is not that strong. They don't make a lot in Russia. U.S. President Barack Obama has already signed an executive order to implement sanctions if Russia does not de-escalate its actions in Ukraine. And this is all propaganda, building up for the next war. This is what he's doing. The NATO chief is doing this. The United States is doing this. European nations are doing this. They are building up the propaganda for what is coming. Now, Sweden is out there, and they're saying that Russia is making plans for war on Sweden. Well, we know this is propaganda again. We know that Russia's not building up military assets, and they're not going to invade Sweden. That would be absolutely ridiculous, and this makes no sense whatsoever, except to build up the propaganda that we see all over the place. Now, of course, the United States is out there saying, since Russia is building up all their troops and what they've done in Crimea, it looks like U.S. military in Europe is going to increase right now. And there are about 67,000 U.S. military members are currently stationed on the European continent, mainly in Germany, which is about 40,000 troops, Italy, around 11,000 troops, in Britain, around 9,500 troops. And with Russia's unlawful military intervention in Ukraine challenges our vision of Europe as a free and a place of peace. It changes Europe's security landscape. It causes instability on NATO's borders, and it is a challenge to the international order. NATO's top commander, the U.S. General Philip Breedlove, expressed concern at the end of March about the large Russian troop presence along the Ukraine border, fearing it could lead to an intervention by Moscow in Moldova. And they are looking to build up troops in Europe. The United States is going to be bringing in military assets, and of course they have been. This is nothing new. They've been bringing in troops. They're bringing in troops into Romania. They're bringing in the USS Donald Cook that is sailing into the Black Sea. We can see troops are being, and U.S. and NATO troops are being built up all along where Russia is. They're having drills inside Ukraine where U.S. troops and NATO troops are coming in. So there are definitely troops being built up all around that area. Now, Libya, we understand in Libya, the Libyan people are rising up. They want their country back. They've been pushing the government out. They pushed them out of the parliament building. They went into a five-star hotel. They tried to load up a tanker with oil, and the U.S. forces came in, took control of the tanker, and brought it back to Libya, because you have to remember, the Libyan people do not control the entire country just yet, and they will not allow the sale of this oil not using the U.S. dollar. They have to sell the oil using the U.S. dollar. But right now, the Libya's government right now wants more power, and it looks like they might resign or completely change the people in their cabinet to get more power, because they feel they don't have enough power in Libya to control what is going on, and they're looking to get more power and change out the cabinet. And there were reports that they were going to resign, and we'll have to see what happens. And I believe the militia, the Libyan militia, the people of Libya, are continually forcing and pushing the government out. And this is why they made a call to the world internationally to help them with what is going on here, because the terrorists are taking over the country and they need help and troops, and they made a call to UN to help them, and we'll have to see how this turns out. And of course, we're seeing that already the United States has created this commando force that's going to go throughout the Middle East and into Africa to fight al-Qaeda terrorism, which is really the people in each one of these countries that are trying to take back their country. Just like in Ukraine, those people are now terrorists. Pretty soon they'll be calling them al-Qaeda. Now, we understand that we have the peace talks in Iran. We understand that this is about their nuclear talks, nothing with banks, not selling their oil using the U.S. dollar, nothing with the IMF taking over control over the banks of Iran. It's all about their nuclear reactors and their non-existent nuclear weapons. Because we have to remember, going back 30 years since 1979, they've been saying that Iran is going to develop a nuclear weapon, and they're 3 to 5 months out. And they've said this throughout the 30 years, and still there are no weapons. They didn't fire it upon anyone. They don't have nuclear weapons. The nuclear inspectors were in Iran searching for nuclear weapons, and they came up with a clean bill of health. And of course, there is absolutely no evidence to show that they have nuclear weapons, but they continually say this. And of course, just a couple months ago, they said, they're 1 month out, they're 2 months out, they're going to fire the missiles, and it never happened. And right now, the senators are out there, and they are very angry because you have to remember, Russia and Iran, they're making this deal, this $20 billion oil for goods trade deal, and they're saying this is completely in violation of the P5+1 deal, and they need to impose more sanctions on Iran, and this deal is null and void now because of this. And right now, I guess the president is looking at this, and he hasn't really said much. His administration hasn't said much, but the senators are out there pushing this and pushing this. And what they're worried about is that the trade deal could pave the way for Iran to acquire highly advanced Russian weapon systems, which Tehran has been seeking to purchase for months. These include the S-300 long-range surface-to-air missile systems, which is similar to America's Patriot missile. If Iran moves forward with this effort to evade U.S. sanctions and violate the terms of oil sanctions relief provided for in the interim deal, the United States should respond by instating the crude oil sanctions, rigorously enforcing significant reductions in global purchases of Iran's crude oil, and sanctioning violations to the fullest extent of the law. And they wrote a letter to Obama, and this is what they had in there. And of course, they don't want them to get these advanced weapons, because when all's said and done and this war starts, they don't want these countries to have advanced weaponry, because this will make it more difficult to get into these countries and take them over. And this is why they don't want Syria to get the weapons from Russia, because Russia's weapons are pretty advanced. They don't want Iran to get these weapons, and they're continually using this propaganda to stop this from happening. And we can see they are definitely building and building the next false flag event. This is happening, and I truly believe that this Ukraine incident at this point is a little bit of a diversion to keep our eyes off of what's really going on in Syria at this time. Because what we are seeing is Kerry is out there saying that he is pushing for the U.S. military to be more aggressive in supporting foreign-backed militants operating inside Syria. And the Pentagon right now is warning against any such effort, saying it might derail the removal of the chemical weapons. But again, Kerry, the Obama, they don't care about that. They know they need to get into Syria. And right now, Kerry is saying that a U.S. strike in Syria wouldn't be devastating at this point. It wouldn't really remove Assad, but what it would do is it would help the rebels to regain control of the country and hopefully weaken the army as much as possible so the rebels can get into the country. Now, at this time, what they are doing is they're completely playing up every angle they possibly can. Right now, the UN is bringing up that the Syrian government abuses far outweigh the rebel abuses, and Assad should be brought up on charges. And they're coming out saying that, yes, the chemical attack, look what he's done again. And we could see they're continually building and building and building this up. And why are they doing all this? Because they are getting ready to do something big. Because Assad just announced that he will seek re-election. Now, we understand that the elections are coming up in July of 2014. They instituted a law that says you have to be born in Syria, a Syrian citizen, and you had to live in Syria for 10 years. Most of the rebels are not Syrian, and most of them haven't lived there, so they cannot be president. And if the people vote Assad back into power, it's going to be very difficult to say that these people are suffering under his rule. And this is why they're making this move now. This is why we're seeing all of this come about. This is why you see the military assets being shipped down there. This is why you see more of these soldiers being trained to go into Syria. This is why all eyes are off Syria at this point, and all eyes are on Ukraine. They are totally planning something. They've been hitting us with cyber attacks from the Syrian Electronic Army, making us believe that Syria is attacking the United States. Now, what's very interesting is they know that once they go into Syria and they have this event and the war starts, all the players are exactly the same. There is no difference. It's Russia, China, Iran, Syria, North Korea. They know it's all of these players, and they realize they need to get to Russia and to China. And they've been trying to get through Ukraine, and now they're going to try the route of Syria. And what we're seeing right now, to continually demonize Russia, they said that those attacks on Neiman Marcus and Target, they traced it all back to Russia. And again, if they can do this, they should be able to, with a flick of a switch, trace where all this spam comes from, and all that spam in your mailbox would stop. Let me just say, they have no idea where this took place. They don't know who did it. All they know is pretty much nothing. All of a sudden, during all of this crisis and all these sanctions and demonizing Russia, all of a sudden they've come out and said they figured it out, and the FBI, they figured it out, that Neiman Marcus, Target were all attacked by Russia. And this went on to say that the FBI has linked the group in the past to attacks on more than 100 companies, including Citigroup, JCPenney, and Neiman Marcus. So we could see what is happening. They're continually keeping this up. Now, there was another report out there about there are additional security holes in the power grid, and this has the federal officials scrambling right now. And the vulnerability of the power grid has emerged as among the most pressing domestic security concerns. Many of the grid's important components sit out in the open, the report said, often in remote locations, protected by little more than cameras and chain link fences. And of course, they're talking about a physical attack where most of this equipment is laying out there. And a lot of the software in the power grid right now, they're saying there's so many security holes in there, probably from all the NSA spying and all the back doors, that anybody can get it in there at any time, and the federal government has done nothing about this. Of course they haven't, because we know what's going to happen. This next false flag is going to be something that we have never seen before, because it is going to be horrific. They are going to bring this full steam ahead with a cyber attack, which will bring down the power grid in parts of the country. We're going to see an attack on the financial system, which will bring down the NASDAQ, which will bring down the stock exchange and the BAT system. That's why they have kill switches. They will hit the banks, siphon off money, and all of a sudden we will have capital controls in the banks, and the bail-in documents will be used at this time. And when all of this is coming about, all of a sudden we will see that Malaysian airline coming into focus, and it will be flying someplace in the United States. Where that will be, we don't know at this point. It will most likely be carrying some type of payload, most likely a nuclear payload, to blame this on Iran, or it could be a chemical, but I'm thinking nuclear at this point. And we will see that. We will see chemical attacks throughout the country, because all we have to look back over the last year what they've been trying to convince us of. They've been trying to convince us that Al-Qaeda is coming into the country, They're breaking off into lone wolf groups. A lot of Americans who went over to Syria were trained to make bombs. They were radicalized, and then they came back to America, and the FBI, DHS has lost contact with them. We understand that FBI was out there arresting the National Guard and other people, saying that they've been reading magazines on how to make bombs to keep this fresh in our minds. They're continually reporting on the flight to keep us reminded of the flight number and what the flight is, and it's lost. It's not really down anywhere. They can't really find it. They're just trying to keep this in our heads. We also have to understand that they keep reporting that Assad is hiding chemical weapons and biological weapons. We understand all of this is starting to take place. We see what is happening. We see the physical attack in the power grid in California. Now they are running out of time. We are in April already. The economy is teetering on a depression. The stock market is hitting the top of the bubble. The real estate market is hitting the top of the bubble. It's getting more and more difficult to keep this thing going. The illusion is falling apart. Their plans haven't gone the way they thought. They thought they were going to have Ukraine. They thought they were going to have full control of Africa. They thought they were going to have full control of the Middle East, but it is completely falling apart. And they also thought they were going to get into Venezuela as well to bring this home, but it's all falling apart. It's getting more and more difficult to keep the status quo. And now we have Russia and China making their move, putting the yuan and the ruble out there with all their deals, bypassing the dollar. Countries are loading up with the yuan and rubles in their reserves, dumping the dollar, and most likely the yuan will be backed by gold, ruble backed by gold, and all of this will lead to World War III. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.